All right, everybody, homeschool here, day one. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. It is literally a class that I teach a whole semester on, even a year, but we're going to do it in 3 hours. So World War II is the first day here of homeschool online. So here we go. What's going to lead us to World War II is the Treaty of Versailles and the ending of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles is one of the very biggest causes of the World War II conflict. As a result of the treaty, after the armistice, Germany is told that they have to pay $15 to $25 billion in reparations. Now, we just talked about this last Friday, and $15 to $25 billion in 1918 money is like 250 some trillion or some ridiculous sum like that. It is impossible for Germany to pay this. The British and the French tacked their Lend-Lease bills onto Germany and forced this on them. And again, the Germans were going to be given, after 3 years, they had to pay $5 billion annually until 1921. And then they would be given 30 years to pay off the fixed sum that they were given at that time. And so Germany is struggling. Now, there is a time in the 1920s where they do begin to be welcomed back into the Western European fold, and they are have a little bit of industry growing, but it is the Great Depression that is really going to do in Germany. You can see this young lady here burning German marks for heat in her fireplace. Here's a guy sitting here left homeless, a soldier after World War I. And this is where we get the first appearance of one Adolf Hitler, who is going to buy into the Nazi program and lead what is known as the Beer Hall Putsch. I don't know which is easier for you guys to see. We'll go this way. So, the end of World War I takes place on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m., the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. Very last second. Now keep in mind, no foreign soldier had set their foot on German soil at this point. And the German Prime Minister, a guy named Ludendorff, wants peace. All right? We just want to stop the fighting. An armistice is a ceasefire. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany is going to leave the throne, and he's going to turn it over to a democratic government known as the Social Democratic Party. And Germany becomes a democratic republic, a nation that will be governed by laws. Now, Germany, key important here, is signing an armistice. An armistice, as I said, is a ceasefire. There's no winner, there's no loser. We're just going to stop fighting. The Germans had been told that they're going to get a mild peace settlement, right? You know, it's going to be like we always do here in Europe. We're going to fight, and then we're going to call a timeout, and things are going to continue. But this does not happen. And the Germans feel betrayed and lied to, and it is one of the things they use later on about how angry they were as a result of what the Allies had done to them in World War I. Now, Europe is in financial ruin. They had been the biggest creditor of the world. Since Columbus got lost in colonization, they ruled the world. Now they are one of the largest debtors in the world. Right? France is financially and physically ruined. Germany has no manpower. England is physically and financially broke as well. And so now power shifts westward. I call it the Percy Jackson effect, as power shifts across the ocean to the United States. And the old international order is dead. This is a big door hinge in world history, where we close the door to the monarchical past. There is no more Ottoman Empire. The Romanov dynasty of Russia is gone. Austria-Prussia is destroyed. The King of Germany is gone, and we move into the new 20th century. And so Germany is going to be carved up. You can see all of this red here, the new Czechoslovakia and Poland, all of this red used to be part of Germany, and it is going to be dismantled as part of these treaties. And the biggest problem when it comes to World War I was the fact that Germany and the Soviet Union were not invited. They were excluded from the Paris peace process. And that is something that will come back to haunt the world. In Versailles, we've got David Lloyd George of England, Prime Minister Clemenceau from France, Victor Emmanuel from Italy. We've got President Woodrow Wilson of the United States, and even Prince Konyei from Japan is there due to the Meiji Restoration. And Germany is, at this point, a relatively new country. It's barely 50 years old. But because of its location, another thing the treaty does is it creates two brand new countries, Poland and Czechoslovakia. They're going to be modern countries created to box Germany in between France and democratic allies in the East. Also, to make sure Germany cannot become a threat again, they are stripped of many of their mineral resources. Heavy things that they need for heavy industry like iron ore, coal, bauxite are removed. And one of the things that Germany could use to pay off its debt was to make steel. Well, they are going to take a large portion of that to make sure Germany can never again build a military. They are relegated to having a 100,000-man National Guard and a 30-mile buffer zone between France and Germany, a DMZ, a demilitarized zone, very similar to the one between North and South Korea, is created. Now, Germany also had agreed to pay for damages done by the war to civilian property in places like Belgium and in France. Well, the real story is France and England also had to pay back their Lend-Lease loans to the United States, a sum of around $2 billion. I'm like, hold chop, this is a lot of money. Oh no, I do not believe that I can pay these. So the two will tack their loans on to what Germany owed. And Germany is told no sum was fixed, all right? We're not going to tell you how much you owe. You're going to pay $5 billion for 3 years until 1921. Then we're going to give you a fixed amount. You will then have 30 years to pay this off. And Germany is like, you're kidding me? You've removed my natural resources from my industrial production facilities. What I have made, I cannot, get to my shipping ports. There's no way we're going to be able to pay this. The Allies say, too bad. The French do not believe this is tough enough. They really want to turn the screws to Germany, who, keep in mind, isn't even there. France wants Germany to pay itself into impotence, or they want the Germans to fail to pay so they can militarily invade. Well, when the British see this treaty that has been created, the British people are not happy. And the greatest economist at the time is a guy named John Maynard Keynes of Keynesian economics. And John Maynard writes, "The Economic Consequences of Peace." And what he says, what you have done is worse than the Romans salting the earth against the Carthaginians. He said this is what he called a Roman peace, a Romans against the Carthaginians. And he says very plainly that not only are you preventing another war, you are making another war likely. So you're not making it impossible, you are making it a distinct possibility by this Carthaginian peace. When the British people see this, such is the clout that John Maynard has, it allows the British to retreat to their island nation, and they back out of the Treaty of Versailles. Now, President Woodrow Wilson of the United States was hailed as a conquering Caesar. There was a cartoon caricature of him coming in wearing a, Roman toga and the laurel crown on his heads. And now he is laughed at. People did not buy into his idea of the League of Nations. And he's drawn as a court jester, bent over with a big butt that was the shape of the United States. And he is being kicked overseas. Now, it's okay for the United States to make fun of our presidents, Saturday Night Live, whatever. But when European countries who we go to help ask to do it, that's another thing entirely. So as he comes home and we're made fun of, the United States says, you know what, we helped you and you don't appreciate it, so we're done. We're going to become isolationists. Babe Ruth is going to hit home runs. We're going to dance the Charleston in the Lindy Hop. Jack Dempsey will be the heavyweight boxing champion. The Great Gatsby will run around East Egg, West Egg. We're done. That's it. And so when this happens, Austria-Hungary, an empire that had lasted for 600 years, is gone. What to do with all the minorities under the Austria-Hungarian Empire? And in Germany, again, raw materials are separated from factories. Factories are separated from shipping points. So how is Germany supposed to pay their bills? Now, even large chunks of Germany are ripped off to create the new nations of Poland and Czechoslovakia, where Germans are going to be living in a minority position in these new countries. And so when the dust of World War I settles, lasting peace in Europe depends on Germans admitting to losing a war, a defeat that they didn't want to admit. No German foreign soldier ever set his foot on German soil. We didn't lose. We stopped fighting. If you guys want to go, let's do it. We didn't lose. We stopped fighting. And the biggest failure was leaving out the biggest Central European power, Germany, and the biggest Eastern European power, the Soviet Union, from the peace process. You couldn't leave those two out. It just doesn't make much sense. So, as I said, France was determined to make Germany pay its reparations, and the United States was determined to collect our money. And the quest to collect on these debts will help bring about World War II. In 1923, several key things happen all at once. 1923, France declared Germany in default of its payments, and they invade the Ruhr River Valley. In the Ruhr was a coal mining district where German coal miners were working in German coal mines. When the French invade, the German workers strike. They just have a sit-in, a peaceful sit-in. So the French soldiers come in and kick them out. They not only kicked them out of their jobs, but they kicked them out of their homes, and they sent in French workers who needed, a place to work and a home to live in because their stuff was destroyed in World War I. Coinciding with that is another factor. This is going to be the perfect storm. A confluence of things will come together that will propel a creepy little man who, in my mind, is biblically evil to world prominence. When the German workers are kicked out, there is a world record low on agricultural prices. European farmers borrowed money for seed and fertilizer, and when they take their harvest to the market, they don't get enough money back, not only to repay their loans, but to keep their families fed through the winter. All right? There's a world record low on agricultural prices, so European farmers are now broke. They lose their jobs, they lose their farms, and they're homeless. And this, when you lose your job on the farm, you normally go to a city looking for work. And this will propel many young men to a brand new political party emerging in Germany, known as the National Socialist Workers' Party. And one of these young men is a guy named Adolf Hitler, who in World War I, as part of his platoon, took out 3 British machine gun nests. Now, he happens to be the only German soldier who survived, but he was wounded in the leg, so he is decorated with the Iron Cross Second Class. So Hitler believes in his mind that he's some kind of bona fide military hero. My philosophy is he kind of hid and shirked while all of his men did the heavy lifting, and when they took out the British, he says, oh, gee, look, I helped them, even though he hid and got shot in the leg a little bit. I don't know if that's true, but, you know, I just throw it in there. So, here is Germany, all these different colors, the greens and the light blues and the yellows and purples are part of Germany that were stripped away from World War I and then later World War II. And so it's in the same year as the French invade the Saar River Valley, the same year as there's a world record low on wheat prices, that Hitler shows up in Munich. It was his home before the war. And as he walks into the city looking for a job, he hears the mayor of Munich, a guy named Max von Luger, speaking. And he is up there, you know, preaching German nationalism. We should love Volkswagen, and we should love Glockenspiels, and we should love Lederhosen, and we should love beer. And you know whose fault this is? It is the French. Look what they are doing to us. And just as he says it, the French invade the Ruhr River Valley. And Mayor Max von Luger's speech isn't aimed at telling people how he was going to solve their problems, but instead, he was going to tell them who to blame for their problems and take them back to an earlier age when things were good. And the middle and lower class eats this up. It is who the Germans tailored their image towards. And when Hitler hears this, it is like transfused right to his brain. He eats it up. Here I am, a bona fide military war hero. I got this. So Hitler joins the party. And he believes their 25-point program, which says one of the things they're going to do is refute the Treaty of Versailles. They're going to rearm, they're going to strike the French, and they're also going to target the Jews' anti-Semitism because they were surviving better than anyone the Great Depression. The Hebrew community had professional jobs, doctor, dentist, printer, things that everybody needed. So when it was bad for everyone else, their small, close-knit communities were surviving just a little bit better than other people. And so the Nazis will focus their appeal to the lower middle class, unemployed guys like Hitler. And the French fall into it when they invade the Ruhr, validating the venom that Max von Luger was spewing. And so Hitler joins, and it finds out that he has one skill. He couldn't get into the art school, but he was a good public speaker. And Hitler was out banging the drum for recruitment, and he knew when to lower his voice in Volkswagen and Autobahnen and Bratwursten, and when to raise it Strudel and Glockenspielen, Lederhosen, and, I'm just using these words, no offense, people of Germany, just to build a little excitement here. And Hitler is dominating the party. He is a rising star, and everyone is signing up in droves because of this guy. And so as a result, one of the German World War I war heroes, Ludendorff, comes up and says, hey, Adolf, you know what we need to do? We should launch, brother. We should launch some type of coup. We need to get rid of this wimpy Weimar Republican democratic government and take over. And, everyone loves you. You're a good speaker. Let's do it. Well, during Oktoberfest, Hitler leads what is known as the beer hall putsch. He jumps up on a table in a beer hall that's still in Munich. He fires his gun in the air. Come on, revolution. And the Germans are, aye, die, die, swinging with their bear steins like, who is this guy? Come on, revolution, let's go. And they're like, who is this clown? And all of a sudden the police come in, they cuff and stuff Hitler, and he's done. And Hitler is going to go on trial for treason. And when he does, it's broadcasted on German national radio. And he decides that he's going to use this trial to make himself a nationally known figure in the world. And he claims the Nazi 25-point program as his own idea. I'm going to strike at the French. I'm going to refute the Treaty of Versailles. We're going to get rid of the Jews. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. He takes credit for the Nazi 25-point plan. And in the end, he's sentenced to prison, where He will spend the next 5 years and he will write a book called Mein Kampf, which simply means my struggle. And while he's in prison, he comes to a realization that true power cannot be taken. Any thug can seize power. Hitler says true power only happens when the people beg for you. They ask you to stay in charge, like they did to Augustus Caesar. When they beg you to take it, when they beg you to lead them, that's when you have attained true power. And so over the next 5 years, under the leadership of Prime Minister Gustav Stresemann, Germany slowly begins to return to prosperity. They weren't completely devastated. They weren't completely broke. And Germany is beginning to stabilize. When again, a couple things happen. Stresemann will resign as prime minister and act as the head ambassador. He believes this will be the best thing for him and Germany. That's number one. Number two, the Great Depression hits. And when it does, the German parliament, the Reichstag, will grind to a halt. The big problem is, the German people are industrious and hardworking, and the German government had a thing that they called unemployment insurance, that if you lose your job, the German government will give you your salary until you find another job. With the idea being it's not going to take you too long. You're going to find a new job very quickly. You're not going to sit around on your tail waiting for someone to bail you out. Well, with the Great Depression, there literally are no jobs. And the German government was like, oh God, we got to pay this unemployment insurance. So because they never had a very good world history teacher, they crank up the printing press and they create more money, which causes massive inflation. So to stop this, the president, Paul von Hindenburg, Ludendorff's, partner as a World War I hero, and Hindenburg by this time is in his 90s, appoints an economist named Heinrich Brüning as chancellor. Now, Article 48 of the German Constitution was written in by a guy named Otto von Bismarck. And Otto put it in there as an homage back to ancient Rome, where in times of crisis, a dictator can come to power for 6 months or until the crisis was solved. Well, in the German Constitution, a dictator will be elected with full power to solve the crisis. And the problem for Brüning is everything he tries backfires. Unemployment doesn't decrease, it doubles. Now, Brüning is the guy that's handed the ball. It's not his fault things are so bad, but it appears his fault because whatever he does doesn't work. And this is the year 1928 when Adolf Hitler gets out of prison. When Hitler gets out of prison, the Nazis only have 12 seats in parliament. When he reassumes his role as, a political speaker and recruiter, 2 years later, the Nazis have 107 seats, right? A third of the Reichstag. The combination of the Great Depression and Hitler's oratory will send thousands of young men into the Nazi Party. Their numbers swell from about 100,000 to well over 1 million. And they were given like UPS brown pants and tan shirts. And their job was to capture power, to eliminate political opponents. They did it by public speaking, they did it by campaigning, and also through beating up and threatening anybody who got in their way. And Hitler, now out of prison, is the guy behind all of this. And so when it's 1932, Hitler actually runs for president. And everyone laughs. This creepy little guy has no chance. But he almost wins. It's very close. And so President Hindenburg wants to bring Hitler into his cabinet. We'll use his popularity with the people, but we can thus control him. And so Hitler was offered the job, and he says no. And they're like, what do you mean? He says, well, I will assume the job if I can be chancellor. And the current chancellor at the time, a guy named Franz von Papen, says, well, no, that's my job. And Hitler says, yeah, I know, so if I can't get it, then I'm not going to take your job. Well, that's how it goes until the disastrous day of January 30th, 1933. When things aren't getting better, President Hindenburg nominates and asks Hitler to be the legal chancellor of Germany. Hitler's dream has come true. He didn't seize power. They looked for him, they begged him, and they asked him to become chancellor. Legally, he gets power. What this means is that all German civil servants have got to listen to Hitler. When he's named, there are pockets of resistance in the South from Roman Catholic priests and bishops. Well, the churches are closed, some are burned, the priests and bishops are hanged, or they disappear. People kind of drop their heads and keep their mouths shut. In the northern part of Germany, German Lutherans and Methodists protest, they speak out, they disappear, some of them are murdered, and their church is closed, and the same thing happens as it did to the Catholics in the South. And then in February, a Dutch communist lights the Reichstag on fire. He is captured a couple blocks away. He was an old man with one wooden leg. Surprise, surprise, he was shot. And he was a card-carrying member of the Dutch Communist Party. And Hitler says, oh no, we're not letting any of those commies in here. So he points the finger and says, oh my gosh, I must declare martial law. I must become chancellor and become a dictator using Article 48 because I've got to keep you safe from the communists. So from February of 1933 until May of 1945, with Hitler's death, Germany becomes run by a dictatorship. Paul von Hindenburg, who's 94, will shortly after this die, leaving Adolf Hitler as the one guy in power in Germany. By March of 33, this was just a couple months after gaining power, the Enabling Act was passed. And that allowed Hitler to rule by decree. Whatever he said becomes law. By July 14th, 1933, the Nazi Party is the only legal party in Germany. When people see this happen, and things like Kristallnacht, the European leaders say, oh, let's adopt a policy of appeasement. Hitler is a bully, just let him go for a while, he'll run out of air and no one will care. And Hitler refutes the Treaty of Versailles, and he begins to draft soldiers into his army. He says that he wants to annex territory, so he goes into Austria. Now, the Austrians had agreed to vote on it. Afraid that he would lose the vote, Hitler invades on March 12th, and the Austrians welcome him. Next, he wants Czechoslovakia. He wants the German people of the Ur region, the Sudetenland, back. And Czechoslovakia is an allied country of England and France. Well, the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, the spineless amoeba, flies down there and gives up Czechoslovakia, saying, I've bought peace with honor. Hitler has no more territorial claims on Europe. It's going to be okay. And slowly but surely, Hitler is taking over. What he wants is for someone to challenge him. Hitler's, trump card is that he is not afraid to go to war because that's what he really wants. So he will develop new tanks, new more, heavily armored and more powerful ships, new airplanes. He will create what will become known as the Blitzkrieg. And on September 1st of 1939, Germany will invade Poland. In less than 10 days, less than 2 weeks, he captures the modern armed nation of Poland without having to, fire a shot, Distinguishing himself in Poland is a young general named Erwin Rommel, who will play a large decisive role in the rest of World War II. People are shocked and stunned by the speed with which Hitler captures Poland. Also shocked are his Soviet allies from the Nazi-Soviet pact. And they had agreed, Germany and Russia, Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler, to divide Poland between them. Well, Hitler, did so much damage, he said, well, I know our deal was 50-50, but I've got 2/3, take it or leave it. And Poland will cease to become its own independent nation till the next 50 years with the fall of the Soviet Union. The next spring in 1940, Germany will invade France in a thing known as Operation Sickle Cut, taking France out of the war in just 6 weeks. So what makes Germany so powerful? Well, when it comes to the Navy, England still had the biggest Navy in the world, but the German stuff was more modern. Some of the British stuff was good, but it was aged, World War I and even before type quality. So the Germans might not have been numerically superior, but they were bigger, stronger, and faster. And they also made up for that with their U-boat fleet, the submarine, their undersea boats that could destroy ships from under the water. At the beginning of the war, German air power was equal in quantity. They had the same number, but their quality was the best in the world. The German planes, the Messerschmitt, the Focke-Wulf, were first-rate airplanes. And the infantry, German training of soldiers was simply the best in the world. Going back to the American Continental Army at Valley Forge with Manfred von Steuben, the Army of the Potomac by George McClellan. If you want your soldiers trained, you go get Prussians to do it. Well, the German soldier training system and their non-commissioned officers, their sergeants, were awesome. You hate to say it, but they did the job well at this time. The big question is, why did nobody in the West confront them? Now, a key thing to point out, a lot of the guys in the German Wehrmacht, the German war machine, will be drafted, conscripted soldiers, the average everyday Joe. Only about 25% become hardcore Nazis, but they cause a lot of damage in between. So Blitzkrieg is simply something that was very old, going back to the days of Alexander the Great maybe. It is a 4-phased assault designed to have speed and create confusion and chaos behind enemy lines. The first wave, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, will come in and drop bombs and strafe the enemy with their machine guns. Everybody was preparing for another war like World War I with trenches. An American guy by the name of Billy Mitchell talked about war in the fourth dimension, but nobody except Germany will pay a whole lot of attention to them. Once the Luftwaffe is done, the second wave, you will be battered by artillery, the legendary German 88mm cannon. A lot of armies had different guns to do different jobs: anti-aircraft, anti-ship, anti-tank, anti-personnel. Well, the Germans had one weapon and just changed the type of shells in them. And so it was a do-anything weapon. It fired faster than the speed of sound, and it was so powerful, they said, on a flat trajectory, one could shoot 8 to 9 miles in perfect conditions in like Kansas. Now, I don't think that's true, but it still shows you its power. You never heard the one that got you. Now, when you're waking up stunned and discombobulated and your ears are ringing from the artillery, here comes a giant, German tank, a Panther, a Panzer, even worse, a Tiger. And they carry 88mm cannons as long as machine guns, and then the infantry cleans up any small pockets that are left. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's devastating. Now, you can't do it on a broad front, but if you focus it at a strategic point and you blow through it, you demoralize the enemy, you get behind them. It's exactly what Alexander the Great used to do, and it just paralyzes the army's will to respond. And so, using this technique, the Germans are going to practice in the Spanish Civil War in 1936. And then when it's used in Poland, Poland, as I said, surrenders in less than 2 weeks. And Time magazine had on the front cover a German tank rolling in, and this is where the name Blitzkrieg is given. Once Poland falls, France's knees are shaking. Oui, oui, oh no, the crepe, what do we do now? Because Germany is coming at them. All right, there's no threat to their east, and France knows what's coming next. And so in 1933, the Treaty of Versailles had limited German military strength to 100,000 people. Just 7 short years later, Hitler will build his mighty Wehrmacht and his Waffen SS squadrons, and so for the 3rd time in 70 years, from the Franco-Prussian War, World War I, until now, the French defensive strategy is going to fail. And the battle for France, if you've seen the movie Dunkirk, here it is known as Operation Sickle Cut. It was an audacious plan, part of it dreamt up by Erwin Rommel, and the speed and the audacity of it goes right to Hitler's crazed mania psyche. What's going to happen is German Army Group B is going to invade the Low Countries of the Netherlands and Belgium, exactly like they did in World War I, betting that the British and the French will move into there to try and stop them from getting into Paris. That's where they will engage. When that happens, the vaunted leader Erwin Rommel will shoot out of the Ardennes forest, which is thought to be impassable with its lakes and its streams and its just, jagged cliffs and bluffs from the Ice Age. No one can get through there. Julius Caesar said it was nigh impossible, and if you can't get through it with the muscle power and engineering and manpower that Caesar had, it's tough. So while the British and the French are facing Army Group B, around them, behind their back, is in a curve, like a sickle, is going to come Rommel, who's going to reap 4 armies, 2 British, 2 French, and either kill them or drive them into the sea. Well, on May 10th, 1940, the Luftwaffe begins their bombardment, and they destroy much of the Allied air forces on the ground before they even get into the air. The British and the French do what they always do. They go into Belgium as planned, and as they do that, they engage. Oh man, here comes Rommel. Rommel blows out of the Ardennes forest. It was lightly defended by, JV troops for the French. They didn't think anybody could get through, so they didn't guard it. And by May 12th, the French are blowing up bridges over the Meuse River because the Germans got there in half the time the French allotted. It was a major line of resistance, a big river to try and slow them down. Now, much is made about the French surrender, and it's not really fair to the French soldier. There were some individual acts of heroism and bravery by the French army. They had 2 problems. Number one, they were poorly led. There was an argument between the old guard in France, the colonels and the generals, and then the lieutenants, captains, and majors. Like, no, this is what we did in World War I. It will work. And they're like, well, actually, it didn't work in World War I. We should try this instead. So there was a conflict in command. And then it's the equipment. Some of the French soldiers were only given 1,000 to 1,500 rounds of ammunition. With a machine gun, you blow through that in a couple minutes. There was no resupply. There was no backup. So all they could do was like throw their gun at them, and they literally had no chance. And while they're getting gobbled up, the 4 Allied armies, 2 British and 2 French, are going to get shoved towards the English Channel. When the British Field Commander Lord Gort says, oh man, we're in a pickle, there was a French army to the north on the North Sea, 2 British armies in the middle, and then a French army in the south. And Lord Gort says, oh man, this isn't good. We're going to stop and we're going to move northward. I think we're going to need some help. And he contacts British Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay and says, Bertie, old boy, can you come and get us out of here? with the British and the French running to the three port cities of Cologne, Dunkirk, and Calais, Boulogne, and Dunkirk. Winston Churchill, who had been warning about Hitler, who nobody had been paying attention to him, gets put back in charge of He's elected prime minister. He had been saying, keep an eye on Hitler, keep an eye on him, and everyone thought he was crazy. Well, now he's prime minister, and he goes to Parliament and says the situation in France is bad, very bad indeed. So here's Army Group B attacking here, and this big sickle. Here's Boulogne, Calais, and Dunkirk are the three port cities where everyone is trying to evacuate to. And here is the edge of the Ardennes, this millions and millions of trees with, deep sheer cliffs, 40, 60 feet wide, gorges, waterfalls, mountains. It is just incredible, incredible terrain left over by the Ice Age. Well, on May 26th, when Lord Gort contacts Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, one of the greatest dramas of all of World War II is going to commence, and it is one of the biggest symbols of pride by the British people, rightfully so, in their history. It's known as Operation Dynamo. The port cities of Boulogne and Calais are overrun, leaving only tiny little Dunkirk as the only place for the soldiers to travel to. And the Queen's Rifle Brigade, Queen's Volunteers, the personal protectors of the Queen, will sacrifice themselves, saying, we will fight to the last man, we'll fall back building to building, street to street. And around Dunkirk are 8 like canals with earthen dams and dikes. We will fall back trying to delay the Germans while you guys escape. The Queen's 1st Rifle Brigade, you can't say enough about their valor. And the British Navy shows up. The problem is the water around Dunkirk wasn't deep enough for the big British naval ships to come in at anchor. And if they were within range of the German 88mm cannons, and so several ships were sunk. Problem is there's 700,000 guys stranded on the beaches. 300-some thousand British and 300-some thousand French. And when the Navy ships can't get in, an appeal goes out by the British government to anybody who could come and assist, please do so. And what happened next is just incredible. The people of Great Britain respond. Tugboats from London, garbage scows, fishing vessels from the coast, virtually anything bigger than a bathtub with an outboard motor on it begins to sail over to Dunkirk. Some of the Royal Yacht Club, the sail-powered ships, volunteered and had to be turned around by the Navy. And what's known as the little ships will show up. They will come in, they said, oh, we can take 15 or 20 guys. They'll wind up taking 30 or 40. And they're supposed to go out to the big, naval ships and then offload them and then go get, 20, 30, 40 more. But German bombers began to bomb the big boats. So the little ships said, heck with this, we'll just keep going ourselves. And they organized themselves in a big loop. They spaced themselves out. They said, hey, if a soldier falls overboard, don't stop. The next ship will get them. There is an outbound lane and an inbound lane. And they go day and night for 3 days, getting over 300,000 guys off the beach. By June 1st, it was possible only to sail at night because the Luftwaffe was, shooting up and bombing the boats day by day, or during the daylight. So at 11 p.m. on June the 2nd, a call goes out, British Evacuation Force, British Expeditionary Force has been evacuated from the continent. Repeat, British Expeditionary Force has been evacuated from the continent. And everybody is happy. And this is awesome as Captain Timmerman radios that message. But Prime Minister Churchill is forced to go on the BBC radio and say, this is awesome, but wars are not won by evacuation. It's great we saved the British Expeditionary Force, but now we are the next target. The other problem is the British made it home, but they had to leave all of their equipment, a lot of their heavy, artillery, their guns, their trucks and motorcycles, their ammunition were left on the beaches. They could get the guys home, but none of their equipment. So now that they're home, what do? All right, they got Robin Hood's bow and arrow and King Arthur's Excalibur. Other than that, they don't have a whole lot. The next day, the little ships return to try and get some of the French off. They're only able to get 30 to 40,000 off when the German army punches through, and the French army pretty much surrenders at that point. And so it is here that the Germans have not even missed a step. They've really not been pushed this far in the war, which is going to bring us to the exciting Battle of Britain. Germany's riding this wave of victory after victory after victory. And the next plan is, well, we'll do what we always do. We'll blitzkrieg Great Britain, all right? We'll drop some bombs on them, all right? When they're softened up, all right, we'll artillery and we'll send in the foot soldiers. Well, the only thing separating them was a tiny strip of water known as the English Channel. And England's defense is now going to fall to the Royal Air Force. And it's funny, there's an old crusty Air Force commander getting ready to retire named Hugh Dowding, and he's called in by the King and Churchill. All right, how many squadrons do you need to defend England? And he says, 52. Well, what are you going to do with them? Well, the problem is I don't have 52. Why not? How many do you have? 36. Well, that's not as much as 52. Duh, I know that. I'm the one who told you idiots not to send our Air Force over to France. They weren't ready. They're being led by the French. They got blown up on the ground. I don't have enough men to protect the nation. So we're going to have to try something different. We're going to have to build planes, and I'm going to have to spread the men out. I'm going to try something new, because if you look, all right, we are 16 squadrons short. So England will begin to build planes, but the plane is fine, but a fighter pilot takes a lot of skill and training. Meanwhile, it's early summer, and Hitler plans what is known as Operation Sea Lion to hit at the beginning of August, at the latest September. And so with the invasion of England fresh on his mind, the Luftwaffe begins their assault. And this is where England has three technological advantages. Number one, early radar. Stations are posted around the British Isles. And so normally you would have to be up in your plane flying around and around and around all the time looking for the enemy. This wears out your equipment and the pilot. While with radar, Dowding could spread squadrons of soldiers throughout England. The radar would let them know where the Germans were coming, what their heading was, so only one or two squadrons need to go up in the air while everyone else is on the ground. They know where the Germans are coming, so they can engage them, fly 30, 45 minutes, an hour, and then land. Number two is the capture of the Enigma machine off a damaged German submarine. I wish I had time to tell you this story. A damaged German submarine was out in the ocean, and the British, under a good bit of ingenuity, will outfit a British submarine to look German. It's late at night in a storm, and they sneak aboard, and in a running battle they capture the Enigma machine, which was the code machine that was sent out messages from the German high command to their soldiers. The operator was supposed to defend it with his life or blow it up so the Allies couldn't get their hands on it. Well, the operator was getting a cup of coffee or something. He tries to make it back and pull the exploding device, but he's killed beforehand, and the Allies have an Enigma machine. Through a great bit of work, mathematicians, scientists, And Alan Turing, a brilliant man. If you've seen The Imitation Game, what the British government did to him is awful. But by building a computer out of his head, we break the Enigma machine's code. And from this point on, we are able to read and know what the Germans are doing. There'll be a cost to that, though. And then these brand new planes, the Hurricane and the Spitfire. The Hurricane will be a rugged plane with 6 heavy machine guns that will shoot down the German bombers. And then there's the fighter plane, the Spitfire, which was designed specifically to be highly maneuverable and be able to climb and dive vertically. All right. Air combat is all about speed. So who you can turn your nose over and rush to get away from your opponent or climb high and have a high maneuverability. The Hurricane and the Spitfire, the Enigma machine and radar, helps slow the curve on these new German pilots. Flying is experience. Flying is like driving. All right. The more you do it, the better at it you get. And so before the Battle of Britain, the Germans had defeated all of their opponents in between 12 and 48 hours in the air. Well, out of respect for the Royal Air Force, the Luftwaffe will give themselves 3 weeks. All right, and they're going to start here, and then there's red line and green line and light blue line and dark blue line. Little by little, the Germans are going to have to fly farther and farther and farther into Great Britain, and it takes a toll on them. The British pilots were aggressive with their technology, and the Germans are losing planes. The British are shooting down 2 to every 3 planes for one of theirs. And the Germans are getting tired. They're supposed to only fly 2 or 3 sorties or flights a week. Now they're flying 7 or 8, all right? You would get, woken up at about 4:30 in the morning. You'd eat your breakfast, get your briefing. Then you'd be up in the plane bombing England with the sun in the enemy's eyes. But you're up there with those like plastic face masks. There's no autopilot. Everything has got to be done. Your shoulders and back straining and flying, sucking in that rubber, that awful rubber smell out of the air mask. It just stinks. And fatigue is beginning to set in. Imagine for some of this, getting in your car, driving to Disney World, touring the theme park, sleeping, getting up and driving all the way back here to North Carolina. Sleeping in your bed, getting up and doing the same thing again. These 8-9 hour flights. And so while the British are shooting down 2.5 German planes for every one they lost, their numbers are also kind of finite. Well, on August 24th, Hitler makes a mistake when he orders London bombed. And here's where the Enigma machine comes in. Hitler was not convinced that it was sunk, that it sunk with the submarine, so he was going to bomb a little suburb of Coventry where there was a school and an old convent. People wanted to evacuate the suburb, but Winston Churchill had to say no. If we evacuate, German double agents will know, and we will lose surprise. So they had to be sacrificed. While London is bombed, Hitler is giving a speech in Berlin, saying that not a single bomb will fall on the city because the power of the Luftwaffe. While the Royal Air Force asks for volunteers to go on a suicide mission, and while Hitler is giving his speech, bombs explode, making Hitler go crazy. He's embarrassed, and he orders London to be bombed to just, nothing left. This is a break. While the people of London will suffer, they'll sleep down in the underground, they'll send their little kids out to volunteers in the countryside. It allows the Royal Air Force pilots necessary rest and to get repairs to their equipment. And on September 15th, the Battle of Britain will reach its height. And during the fighting, Churchill is asked, how many reserves do we have? The response was none. All right. The British are nearly on their knees. However, they win. And it is believed by many that if the Germans would have attacked the next day, they might have been able to break through, but the Royal Air Force does an incredible job. And Churchill goes on the air and says, "Never have so many owed so much to so few." The brilliant defense of the Royal Air Force was amazing. Now that it's September and the weather is turning bad, Hitler is forced to call off the invasion of England. People actually went out and watched the dogfights going on in the sky during this great day. London does suffer terribly. You see trains blowing up. You see here is the Tower Bridge, little kids, homeless kind of by their house. And when Coventry was bombed and another quarter, the Jewish quarter, the German pilots said that they didn't know what city they were over. Well, please, a big city with a landmark like the Thames River, they knew exactly where they were. Hitler will make a big mistake by attacking Russia, and that is the next video coming up. All right, good job, guys. Hang in there, take a break, and then get right back at it.